Hey, Julia Barzyk here from Wise Investigator. Today I'd like to talk to you about the importance of being able to use plain language when you're communicating your research ideas. And you may have been advised to use simple language or to speak in a way that a layperson could understand for a variety of different products or audiences. But let's talk a little bit about why this is important and then, most importantly, what you can do to develop this skill because it is a skill and it can be developed like any skill. So, plain language is also called plain writing or plain English, and this is defined by the US government as writing that is clear, concise, well organized, and follows other best practices appropriate to the subject or field and intended audience. So this is language that I got from the website of plainlanguage.gov, which is a material that's put out there by a working group of federal employees who are working to decrease the amount of jargon and complicated or non-plain language that's used by the government. And this is to make the government documents and government programs and processes more easy for any citizen to understand. And by doing that, it's actually providing the best value to the taxpayer because taxpayers can actually have a better chance of understanding what's going on within the government. Now, federal research is funded, right? Your research is often funded through the federal government, so it's an extension of what the government is doing. And abstracts that you write or summaries are very often public releasable. So that's one reason why it's important to use plain or simple language that most people can understand, is because some of your work that you submit when you're submitting a proposal, if it's funded, it will make it actually out there as a publicly releasable abstract that anyone could look up, and you'd hope that if anyone does look that up, that they're going to be able to understand it. Now, I know that people at the funding organizations want to make sure that what they put out there as a publicly releasable abstract is understandable. So if you don't use that clear language, someone at the funding organization may have to revise your work or ask you for another submission or something like that, creating more work for them to get that final plain language product. Now, another reason, of course, that you want to use plain language is because you never know the background and the expertise of the people who will be reading your document and performing evaluations or reviews and making recommendations for funding. Now, generally, you can be assured that there will be some subject matter experts involved with that process, but there could be other people involved who aren't very close technical matches in terms of their subject matter expertise. So while you will need to probably go into the weeds and use your technical language in parts of a proposal that you prepare, the material that's up at the front there in your intro, background, literature review, those types of sections, those are ones that can be very important to help somebody who doesn't have a very high level of subject matter expertise, but is a technically educated and informed person, be able to ease them in so that they're able to follow better the rest of your document than they could if you didn't provide that plain language information up front. Now, let's talk a bit about what the resistance is in doing this, because this is something that PIs do get advice on frequently, but it often just doesn't end up happening. Now, I think the first reason why this doesn't end up happening is it's simply a skill that's not developed. PIs just don't know how to talk about their research, or let me say, they don't know how to write about their research in this plain language way. But I gave you a little preview there with my slip up. Actually, PIs generally do know how to talk about their research in a clear, plain language way, but not write about it. So what do I mean by that? And how can you use technology to help you here? So what I'm talking about is many different situations that I've been in over the years where I've received a document from a PI that was difficult to understand. It did not set up the problem, the research problem, in a way that was accessible. Oftentimes, even when it was related to my subject matter expertise, the way that it was presented on the page was confusing. It kind of jumbled or out of order. And then, of course, something that would have been outside my subject matter expertise, those type of one pagers or summary documents, I really wouldn't have much hope of understanding if it didn't use some more plain language. However, in many of these cases, getting on the phone, getting on a call, a meeting with the PI who produced this document would actually result in the PI giving a very clear, very easy to understand description through speaking of the work that they wanted to do. So my tip here is, if you're having trouble writing in plain language, turn on a transcription software and explain it as you're speaking and see what you get there, because most likely you will be able to use some of what you spoke out when you were explaining it orally and use that as a starting point for your written document. So that's a very helpful tip, I believe, that can take you into having something to start with, right? It's going to need to be heavily edited because we don't write the way that we speak, but you'll be able to get some of those ideas out there that you are able to explain. And you do that in conversations, and you do that with teaching, and you do that to family members or colleagues outside your discipline, but you are having trouble getting that explanation on the page. So transcription software is one thing that can help you with that. Another reason why this is not happening is because PIs often feel that they may be talking down to someone if they use simple or like low level type of language. And I want to assure you that even if you're speaking to someone who you believe has a PhD in a certain subject matter that's related to the topic of your research, who may be in a high level position making decisions about research funding and research strategy, they really will not be offended if you use more simple language and you explain something that they already know. There's a different, if you want to think about it as like a warm-up, sort of like a small talk, right? In different cultures, people have different approaches to small talk or how quickly they might get into a conversation. I'm a pretty direct person, and I grew up in a part of the country where people are pretty direct. So that kind of combines where I'm somebody who was more likely to get on the phone and start talking a business or start talking about the topic that we plan to talk about right away. And other people, based on their personality or maybe where they grew up, are going to tend to have a little bit more small talk before they get over onto that topic. And my point here is that either is really okay. People have different styles, and people who are reading your documents understand that. So they understand that you're warming them up a little bit by providing a little bit of background. And what I'm talking about is usually for, say, like a one-page document, really just a few sentences, maybe a paragraph, where you are providing an overview of your research and the landscape of your research, the context for it, right, in a simple way. So further, one of the benefits of providing this type of context or simple language kind of ease into your research is that you provide an opportunity for the reader to kind of start nodding yes. Because if you put some information there that they do know, they're not going to feel insulted, but they're going to say, yeah, okay, yeah, that is right. Yes, that's the state of the field now. okay, yes, that is a challenge. That's something that we need more information on. Or, yeah, that has been a real sticking point for a while. That's where we are. So they're starting to agree with you. And that's a good mindset for someone to be in when they get into the meat of your document. And also, you're showing them that you know that, right? And the third way I believe that PIs get tripped up in terms of not wanting to use this simple language is that they can believe that using simple language will make them look not that intelligent, like they're not very smart or they're dumb, right? Because they're using this simple language and not very technical language. And that's a misconception because when you are a very young student and you're in high school going into college, then you're really ramping up your use of technical language. You're using all the jargon and you're learning all of the big words, all of the big terms, all of the big acronyms. And you're in an environment where you're using those acronyms, you're using those terms, and the people around you know what they are. And you're really in a close community of experts who are nerding out on that stuff. And that is awesome. That's exactly where you want to be, to immerse yourself in that kind of environment where you learn kind of like everything about a narrow topic. And of course, you learn not everything, but more about broader topics and out from there. But that is just the right stage for you to be in, say, as a grad student. But as you move out of that and you advance in your career, using more simple language or being able to use it and demonstrating that you're able to use it actually is signaling a higher status, not a lower status. I was recently looking at the program for the AAAS meeting. And of course, that's a meeting that's full of multidisciplinary STEM professionals. And the people who are speaking there are very renowned scientists in their respective disciplines, giving some really high level talks that are outlining strategies, where we are, thinking about the future, pulling together lots of ideas and doing that synthesis and communicating that clearly. And so these are very high level people. If you read the abstracts and the material that's put out for an event like this overall, you'll find it does use very accessible, plain language. So don't worry about looking unintelligent or uninformed by using simple language. It's actually, by doing that, you're actually going to look to be more mature, more advanced, and of a higher status type researcher. So my tips, well, I have one that I told you about already, which is the transcription. Give that a go because, again, I'm going to repeat this here. Many times I've received a written document from a PI that did not make a lot of sense on the first reading. And after a conversation, it was very clear that the PI was able to explain this very easily, actually, and very well. But there was a disconnect between what they could speak and what they could get on the page. So transcription software can help there. And don't be afraid when you start writing things out to write things out in a very lengthy way that won't sound very good when you're writing it, when you first read it, the first draft, but you will be able to delete and condense it down to something that is really good. So to get yourself thinking along these lines and importantly writing along these lines, don't hesitate to write out things like, the reason why this research is important is, and just answer it in plain language. The reason why this research has never been done before, or why this research is hard to do, has been hard to do, is, fill that out. The reason why I am the PI who's best qualified to perform this research is XYZ. Write things out that way. Those are very important concepts and very important information for you to be communicating. And then as you go through the editing process, you're going to delete a lot of those words and link up those core pieces together. So after a few iterations, it'll sound good.